The nation of Sudan has had a turbulent history since it attained independence from the UK in 1956. It has experienced more than 15 military coups in that time, and the military has ruled the country more often than not, though there have been short periods of civilian rule. But military juntas are not the nation's only problem. Two civil wars raged from 1955 to 2005, with only an 11-year hiatus between. These resulted in the secession of South Sudan in 2011. These wars were some of the bloodiest since World War II, with around 3 million people killed and millions more displaced. Ethnic tensions have simmered and sometimes blazed in other parts of the country as well, particularly in Darfur in the west. Old problems of conflicting water rights in this desert region and long-standing land disputes between farmers and herders have all hardened along ethnic lines. The majority Arab population backed by the government against the non-Arab minorities. This exploded into war in 2003. The war enabled a genocide against ethnic minorities in the province of Darfur, which killed at least 200,000 people. The present human rights situation in Sudan in mid-2023 stems from a series of military coups and pro-democracy protest movements since 2019. The civilian government had been operating under a power-sharing agreement with the Sudanese military and was making progress towards true democratization. The progress was interrupted by military leaders who had committed war crimes, particularly in the 2003 crisis in Darfur. Those leaders feared that if the nation became a true democracy, they would be prosecuted for their crimes. Other military leaders had used their positions to acquire lucrative gold mines in the country and feared that they would lose them under a democratic government. Therefore, a tentative agreement for returning to civilian government soon broke down. Finally, a power struggle within the military led to a civil war between two army factions, the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Their disagreements revolve mainly around power sharing between the two groups, and further ethnic and regional differences simmered below the surface as well. The RSF decided in April 2023 that war was the only way to secure their demands. Most of the fighting between the two factions has centered around Darfur and the capital of Khartoum. This renewed fighting has shattered the already tenuous human rights situation in Sudan, and much of the fighting is along ethnic lines. In Darfur, the RSF has allied with local Arab militias, while the SAF has aligned with the minority Masalit people and various pro-democracy organizations. While both sides have committed atrocities, Amnesty International reports that the majority of war crimes are carried out by the RSF as a sort of continuation of the 2003 Darfur genocide. The RSF and its allies have targeted the civilian Masalit population in retaliation for their support of the SAF. Masalit homes have been attacked and looted, the occupants beaten or murdered. Girls and women have been raped or even kept in sexual slavery by the RSF. The RSF is also accused of recruiting children as young as 14 into its ranks and sending them into frontline combat. Both sides in the conflict have used heavy weapons such as artillery in civilian areas, resulting in widespread civilian casualties, as well as significant damage to infrastructure such as water supplies and healthcare facilities. In at least one case, the RSF attacked a hospital in Darfur, murdered healthcare workers, and destroyed the facility. Nor are the violations limited to Darfur. In Khartoum, RSF members broke into a Christian church, murdered 5 clergy members, and plundered the building. Naturally, the fighting has disrupted food distribution throughout the country, and those regions most affected by the fighting are facing famine conditions. According to the latest estimates, upwards of 10,000 people have been killed in the fighting and another 8,000 wounded. Furthermore, about 5 million people have been internally displaced, which means that they have moved to another part of the country for their own safety, and another 1.1 million have fled the country as refugees. After the bloodletting and war crimes of the civil wars and Darfur, the international community has responded quickly to the latest outbreak of violence in Sudan. The UN has continuously tried to negotiate a ceasefire between the factions, but they have always quickly broken down. The United States and the United Kingdom have placed sanctions on Sudanese countries which fund and arm the combatants. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into war crimes and crimes against humanity by the combatants. The UN has also led efforts to deliver humanitarian aid to fend off famine and a health crisis, and plans to spend over $2 billion in Sudan by the end of the year. But at this time, the fighting continues with no end in sight.